All right, well, it's now time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. And of course, we now roll out the red carpet for Dr. Constance. Good morning again.
Wow. Good morning, Bimbai. I'm also rolling the red carpet for you this morning.
So we've moved from the
but I'm walking to the weekend.
To the royal headliner, Dr. Constance Ikoku.
Good morning, Benga Ashiru and Yolanda Roberts.
Dr. Constance, good morning. Good to see you.
I think we won't see the last of this.
No, we won't.
Nowhere near.
and Bimbai is the one that keeps poking, adding more. Well,
yes.
Wonderful to see you. I hope you're doing well. It's in the studio alone in Lagos out there.
It's very lonely, but you guys are keeping me going.
Great to hear that. Let's get into it. If you're just joining us this morning, hello there and welcome to the program. We'll be looking at the stories that are shaping the agenda for you today. Kicking off with this day newspaper. This day front page centers warning by the opposition that democracy is on the brink over Senate's refusal to clearly mandate real-time upload of election results. On the window, diplomacy, President Tinubu plays the Remy card on Trump. Christian, pastor, soft power. Daily Independent writes about the aviation sector, warning that flight safety is at risk as the country's jet fuel black market booms. INEC tells Nigerians that tech alone can't fix Nigeria's electoral problems. Kwara killings offend our humanity, faith, and shared values, President Tinubu declares. Leadership leads with Kurumin Wali abductees who have been freed, while Kwara jihadist attack victims narrate their ordeal. 2026, Lagos tops as state's budget hits 37 trillion naira. And in politics, PDP National Chairman Turaki says no cause for alarm as INEC recognizes Wike-backed PDP. New Telegraph turns attention to controversy over Senate's position on e-transmission of results. Abaribe, Tambuwal, others insist Senate approved electronic transfer. Kwara, Katsina, Benue killings. Northern governors, Abbas, Kwankwaso demand decisive action on insecurity. Ex-Nexim Bank MD Oya jailed for 2.4 billion naira fraud. And court orders British government to pay £420 million to families of Nigerian coal miners killed in 1949. Vanguard reads that two People's Democratic Party factions have insisted on fielding candidates for 2027. Well, that's a lot of trouble. And soldiers came 10 hours after terrorists had killed scores of people, according to village head in Kwara. The Punch leads with the United Nations condemning these killings in Nigeria as Turkey pledges support. Daily Sun writes about controversy over exclusion of Igbo in school history book. And 8.61 billion naira lost to fraudulent projects in states according to budget. Now let's move to the international headlines. Political crisis for Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and Labour Party internal revolt. It's dominating the headlines today. The Daily Star leads with UK Prime Minister Starmer pointing the finger at intelligence services over the controversial appointment of Peter Mandelson as the country's ambassador to the United States. In essence, he's deflecting blame amid the political storm. The Times headlines focus on the same internal political turmoil. Starmer appears politically weakened and under pressure from within his own party. Daily Mail covers this persistent fallout from the Mandelson-Epstein links issue, with former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner saying she's ready to launch a leadership campaign against Keir Starmer. Daily Mirror highlights the Labour backlash against Starmer's handling of the ambassador appointment, reflecting internal party tensions. Daily Telegraph front page covers senior Labour dissent and disarray over the same issue. Even Boris Johnson now says that the PM is behaving like a dictator in regard to election delay. In Daily Express, Kemi Badenoch claims Britain is not being governed at all under Keir Starmer. plus an investigation into cholesterol-busting drugs, which finds that the drug is not responsible for side effects. It is safe for millions, the report concludes. Our newspaper continues with Mandelson fallout, centering on plans to have the PM resign. Financial Times reports that Starmer has apologized to Epstein's victims. In The Guardian, Starmer is said to be appealing to Labour MPs to save his job. And finally, metro.co.uk, PM battles for survival. Now let's see what these stories mean for everyday people. This is a newspaper. Diplomacy. President Tinubu plays the Remi card on Trump. We know that the First Lady Oluremi Tinubu is a Christian and a pastor, while President Bola Tinubu is a Muslim. This comes into play given that allegation of Christian genocide by the U.S. against Nigeria and the designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Now, U.S. President acknowledged the Nigerian First Lady at America's prayer meeting, and this is being seen as a soft power in action, with President Tinubu leveraging Remi Tinubu's faith profile at a sensitive time between both countries. The event was the 2026 edition of the annual U.S. National Breakfast Gathering. Trump had singled out the First Lady, offering warm remarks. He then went on to speak about security collaboration between the two countries. Well, whoever suggested this apparently did a spectacular job, it seems. But on a serious note, do you think Trump's public acknowledgement of Remi Tinubu signals a deliberate outreach to Nigeria, or was it simply a symbolic courtesy with no policy weight? Benga.
I think Remi Tinubu alone cannot change the dynamics of the reception diplomacy or the bilateral or shuttle diplomacy, as you may want to call it. She's not an institution. She's just the wife of the president. So I think that it's just the normal niceties and courtesy that comes with reception diplomacy. It's quite usual in the reception diplomacy when you exchange pleasantries, niceties, and camaraderie to show that you're one and the person is well received. So I think that we shouldn't take that too far. It's not a scorecard. It doesn't change any dynamics in the scoreboard of Nigeria's shuttle diplomacy.
Right. Well
on the
said,
contrary,
Benga.
can I add a little
All right,
comment?
I just wanted to...
everybody wants to jump in.
Exactly.
Yolanda first.
Sure.
But very quick,
On the
please.
contrary, you know, Benga, you are absolutely right. But looking at this story from a global perspective, this really does help with the narrative that is out there, because people believe that, you know, they only saw the aspect that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a Muslim. But now having this dimension of, oh, his wife is a Christian, it allows the global parties to have a different, you know, sense of opinion when it comes to issues of Nigeria. Here domestically, yes, it's a completely different ballgame. Benga, you are absolutely right. But globally, you must say that this narrative has an impact.
All right, Vimbai, quickly.
Absolutely. I piggyback off Yolanda's comments, especially because of the emphasis on the word narrative.
Yes.
And what we've seen in this era is that international relations and diplomacy has evolved from when diplomacy was about, you know, certain protocols and certain rules-based order. And now it hinges on narrative, ultimately. It hinges on who can tweet what and who can put what statement out there and what perception dominates the actions that are made. So I think this is a step in the right direction. However, it's important for us to also acknowledge the fact that the United States was also this week hosting the Critical Minerals Ministerial, where they've hosted over 50 countries from around the world to discuss policy around engagement with critical minerals. Nigeria was not invited to that engagement. It was an invitation-only engagement. So it also speaks to Benga's point that, well, it's a step in the right direction, but where the real deals are being made and where the real diplomatic engagement is happening, we're yet to see a real impactful seat at the table.
I think if I could just chip in, sorry, just to respond to the beautiful comments. I think diplomacy has gone beyond window dressing. And there is an overwhelming fact on ground. The reality on ground coming at the background of over about 170 people killed in Kwara State, and in other states still very exposed to insecurity. I think coming on a serious narrative like designating Nigeria a country of particular concern just a few months ago, right. I don't think, and I doubt vehemently, that just the posture of one person would change that narrative. Like
but
all right, narrative.
All right,
countries like Saudi Arabia are also CPC. Even China is a CPC, but it doesn't stop the United States from, doing business with them. But yeah, the conversation could go on forever.
Right. Staying with this day newspaper front page, opposition parties, to a very, very serious matter now. Opposition parties in the joint press statement have warned that democracy is in peril over Senate's refusal to clearly mandate real-time upload of election results, describing the situation as a betrayal of trust. But we also have minority senators kicking. There was confusion over whether the upper chamber passed electronic transmission of results or not. Senator Enyinaya Baribe and some other minority members said the Senate did approve real-time transmission of results rather than giving the discretion to the Independent National Electoral Commission to decide to use collation centers. On Arise Primetime last night, he confirmed that electronic transmission was agreed in the executive sessions before the plenary. Abaribe promised to monitor the process when the harmonization committee is set up in order to reflect electronic transmission. Now we know that the House of Representatives has constituted bipartisan committees to harmonize the differences between both chambers of the National Assembly. Now, are we seeing another gazetting moment? Like with the tax laws, with confusion over what really is. Just astonishing what transpires in political circles.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is pushing the pawn across the chessboard. And if you ask me, we said this yesterday, that there is no need for subtle maneuver of the words here. It's so clear. The process involves the presiding officer. What they have passed at the National Assembly is the presiding officer signing and stamping the form EC08 and then being countersigned by the party agent. Afterwards, it is transmitted it is uploaded on the IRF portal. That is not real-time transmission of election results. We want to see it as it's happening, so that everyone it's an inclusive process that everyone wants to participate in. So they should stop this narrative. Nigerians, once again, I said this yesterday, they know what they want.
Benga, I think your point is abundantly clear, but I think what Dr. Constance was trying to say, which I also want to piggyback on, because that's my point as well, is that why does it seem as though there is some sort of a gap in communication between the lawmakers? We've just seen this exact thing play out. When there was the tax laws, they said, oh, this was gazetted and this was not, this was agreed, this was not. We're seeing the same thing all over again, and there's contention over what was said and what was done. So where does this put people now? Are we able to now trust in the system? Because it seems like there's some sort of dysfunction in the whole thing.
There is. All right. Well,
how do we trust the system? In just two sentences, how do we trust the system when all of these proceedings are done in a closed session plenary?
Absolutely.
This debate should have happened on the floor. We should have been privy to it. Why do they feel they need to go and lock themselves up into little rooms when these critical issues are being discussed? So, maybe some of the ambiguity would have been taken away from this conversation if they had just had an open plenary as they do, so that we can hold each of them accountable.
Well, to your point, Vimbai, Senator Enyinaya Abaribe explained that yesterday when he said the sessions that are off camera is done so that everybody is able to say their mind, they're able to trash it out, that sometimes they come almost to blows, disagreeing on what should be and what should not be. So when that is completed, let me finish.
We should see
when that is completed, there's also the plenary. After all, the plenary still happened. So everything cannot be on camera in the National Assembly, and we know that. But the point is that there is non-disagreement, and Senator Enyinaya Baribe and some other senators have said they will hold the Senate to account on that. Let's move on to another story. Daily Independent.
When we have these constant conflicts in the statements that come out of the Senate, it now begs the question of them going into these quiet, closed, private sessions. It now says that clearly we're not capable of translating what happens in those closed sessions to a broader, open discussion. So let's make everything transparent, make everything publicly available.
All right, Daily Independent. Kwara killings offend our humanity, faith, and shared values, President Tinubu declares. Tinubu has also directed that an army battalion move into Kwara community where jihadists killed more than 100 people in Woro, Kayama local government area. He met with Kwara State Governor Abdurrahman Abdulrazak and also approved the establishment of a new military command to lead Operation Savannah Shield to counter terrorists. I have to share with us what battalion means so that we know what we're dealing with. An army battalion is a standard combat unit of the Nigerian army, typically made up of 600 to 1,000 soldiers, depending on its role and deployment. The battalion is usually commanded by the lieutenant colonel and is structured into several groups. So we have support elements such as intelligence, signals, logistics, medical, and sometimes heavy weapon units. When a full battalion is deployed, it signals a serious military commitment. Enough manpower to hold a territory, to conduct sustained operations, protect multiple communities, and engage insurgents over an extended period rather than just carrying out short raids. So there you have it. So the question then would be, why did it take a massacre of this scale to trigger such an action? And what guarantees do residents have that this protection is not just a mere show of force?
And not just a massacre. This is not the first, it's not the second, it's not the third. We've been having these conversations over and over and over again. And I think so many discussions have been looking at possible solutions for what we can do, you know, to quell this type of issue. And I believe yesterday, Benga, you spoke to this as well about the state policing, because you brought this up several times in so many conversations. I must admit it's becoming quite exhausting, because it's not enough to just, you know, have these presidential condemnations and, you know, saying that, okay, we'll have this military base that we'll put in place. We're not seeing enough results in this, because we wouldn't be seeing these massacres reoccurring time and time again.
I think you've put it aptly. I think this, in a situation where the circumstance speaks for itself, it needs no additional condemnation. We all know that this situation offends our humanity, our faith, and our shared values. We all know that this situation is dastardly and barbaric. So we don't need those theatrical rhetorics or political pageantry. We need sincerity. We need something different. We need a political will that will make a difference in this narrative. And I still beg Mr. President again, please forward the state and community policing bill.
Okay, let's take another story in New Telegraph. I'll see how we can manage with time. I thought this is a very interesting story. Justice Anthony Onovo of the Enugu High Court orders British government to pay £20 million each, which is £420 million, to families of Nigerian coal miners killed in 1949. This happened in Enugu State, and the coal miners were killed by British colonial masters. Enugu was the administrative capital of the eastern region then. The miners were protesting harsh working conditions, racial disparities in wages, and unpaid wages. When their demands were not met, they adopted a go-slow protest method, occupying the mine to prevent any activity. This led the British superintendent to shoot and kill 21 people, injuring 51 others in the process. This suit was filed by human rights activist Greg Ono. What an interesting story. I thought, you know, we share this because all over the world people have been talking about reparations. But Dimba, if you have a quick thought on this.
Very quickly, I mean, this is a beautiful story and, well, bittersweet because, of course, the massacre that happened and the pain that it leaves those families with can never go away. However, we continue to talk about how do we correct the injustices that have become systemic on our livelihoods and on our systems of governance and our economies. How do we start to correct the legacy of colonialism in our countries and in our communities? Now, reparations is one of those big conversations. Now, while we know that money doesn't solve everything, in this instance, it is important for us to see the acknowledgement, the admission of guilt, and the conversation about how do we start repairing our nations and our communities from this global system, because colonialism created a global system that always put Africa at the bottom, not just economically, but even in terms of humanity and value of life. So if we can have more of these rulings, if we can have more of these conversations, more of these human rights lawyers pushing for this, it might begin to trigger a change in the global world order where Africa stops being at the bottom of the food chain and we start to reclaim our rightful place in the global political economy.
All right, very quickly, I'd like to share something, because when we talk about historical injustices and reparations, for Africans, is usually waved off, by Western countries. But in the past, there are documented evidences of reparations and historical injustices, amended. So we have, for instance, Germany paid reparations to Holocaust survivors, and Israel is reported that over 80 billion euros were paid in pensions, direct payments, healthcare, and restitution. This was beginning in 1952, according to the Luxembourg Agreement, where Germany has accepted responsibility for Nazi crimes and agreed to that compensation. We also have United States paying reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. Under the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, the U.S. formally apologized. What was paid was $20,000 to per surviving internee. And then United Kingdom paid to victims of colonial era abuses and victims of torture during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. This happened in 2013. The UK accepted responsibility and paid £19.9 million to over 5,000 victims. There you have it. This has happened in the past, so it can happen again. Let's see whether, in Enugu this will be paid. I don't know whether there is any leverage there to do that, but at least that judgment is there. Finally, one story from the international headlines. Washington Post announced it is laying off roughly 1/3 of its workforce. This is more than 300 journalists. This is across the newsroom and other departments as part of what the management called restructuring and strategic reset to adapt to changing reader habits, decline in circulation, and financial pressures. I want to say that when I saw the story, I had to take it because I used to live in Washington, D.C. as a foreign correspondent, and we used to go past the Washington Post office, one of the legacy media organizations, and you admired and respected that organization. Yolanda, any thought on this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a time for everything, and right now we're in a technological era, and as beautiful as it is to remember some of the newspaper media houses that really held fort when it came to the news headlines, we have to really embrace the fact that times are changing. AI is here, technology is here. In the morning when I wake up and I'm looking at what has happened overnight, the first place I'm going to is social media, and that seems to be the conversation of the future, especially with these changes in AI. So social media as well is changing the way we consume news and all the habits that we have. People rarely now turn on a television to watch news. The first place they will check is their phone, their laptop, their iPad. So I mean, we have to roll with the changes.
Okay, just
on a closing note, Washington Post was founded in 1877.
Wow.
Now it was managed by the Graham family, and then it was sold to Jeff Bezos a couple of years ago in 2013.
Yeah.
So change of management, and this is what it is now. Well, those were your headlines for today.
Thanks so much, Dr. Constance. That was a very interesting conversation today.